What is up, YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then just welcome to my channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed if you enjoy good content. Today's video is going to be about Robert Berdella. He was a horrible person, as they always are. And before we get into the video, I want to let you guys know that I'm having a block party. Yes, a block party. And anybody who gets ignorant in my comments are invited. I will block you. Okay, so be respectful of me and be respectful of others, unless you don't mind being blocked. Y'all, I'm feeling this look today. I think today gonna be the day I find Blue a father. I just feel it in my soul. And so I'm not gonna make this intro too long because I gotta get out there and be seen. And if you enjoy the video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below, let me know your thoughts. Share this video with a friend, and without further ado, let's just get into the video. Today's story is about Robert Andrew Berdella. Robert Berdella was born in Ohio, January 31st, 1949. He was the first of two sons born to Robert Berdella Sr., who worked for the Ford Motor Company, and his wife and Robert Jr.'s mother, Mary, was a homemaker, so she was at the house cooking and cleaning. Robert Sr. was a Catholic, and he was like extremely religious. He raised his family under very strict Catholic rules. He made sure that the family attended mass regularly. He also had both his sons regularly attend religious education courses because he wanted them to know what the tea was and how to be a true, real Catholic. Now, as a child, Robert was very intelligent, but he was a loner. He rarely spent any time playing outside of his home. He didn't have any friends. Nobody came over. He was just in his own little world. And that's how he preferred it. His lack of socializing did negatively affect his ability, you know, to socialize and develop and maintain social relationships. He also had a speech impediment, which he was ashamed of. He was severely nearsighted, so he wore very thick glasses, and this made him an easy target for bullies. So unfortunately, on his way to school, during school, wherever he went that little evil children were, he was bullied. He was not at all athletic. Athleticism wasn't his thing. He was a bookworm. But his younger brother Daniel was very athletic. He played football, he played basketball, and their father appreciated this about him. He wanted both of his sons to be athletic because in his mind, that's what a little man was. He was a basketball player, a football player. He was athletic. He was, you know, macho. He really favored Daniel over Robert for these reasons, because like I said, the only balls he was trying to play with were his own. Okay, he was not trying to throw a basketball, catch a football, none of the things. Robert Sr. valued physical education and athleticism over, you know, mental education. So he would oftentimes compare his two sons, and of course he would compare Robert Jr. unfavorably against little Daniel. But apparently this didn't give Daniel too many brownie points, because Robert Sr. was abusive to both of them, both physically and mentally. More so towards Robert Jr. than Daniel, but they both were abused. The father would beat them with a leather strap anytime that kind of saw fit. Like he was just an asshole, period. A religious asshole. Now little Robert, as he's approaching puberty, he realizes that he is homosexual. He is not into the girls like everybody else. He likes the boys. But he was afraid, of course, for this secret to get out, because, you know, this is like back in the day, it wasn't as acceptable. Furthermore, he didn't want another reason for his father to hate on him, so he kept it a secret. He got himself a little girlfriend, and he was just trying to live the life on the straight and narrow, literally. By his mid-teens, Robert is getting more confident. He's feeling a little more self-assured. He's feeling himself, okay? I don't know if he started looking good or what, but homeboy was a little more comfortable. He still was hiding the fact that oh girl, that eyebrow is huge. Oh mama, no. We gotta fix that. Well, we out here now, so whatever. His personality developed into like a really flamboyant one. He was very sassy, very, what's the word? Other than, he was sassy. We just gonna leave it as sassy. He would often be very condescending and very rude to people. He was just I mean, I guess he was his father, Junior. That's just who he was starting to become, a little firecracker, which I guess is kind of good for him. I guess he was getting tired of people bullying him, and so he decided, you know what? It's over for that. It's over for you girls. I'm about to start letting you girls have it. Now, he was particularly sassy and condescending toward women, especially. I don't know what that was about, because I guess he gave some kind of, you know, leeway for the boys because he was attracted to them and he liked them, so he kind of gave them, you know, they had it a little easier. I don't know. That's just my own speculation. That is not confirmed. Now, in 1965, Robert sees the film adaptation of the book The Collector, which was written by John Fowles. I believe it's Fowles. Now, the plot of this movie, if you're unfamiliar, is about a man who stalks and abducts this woman that he finds very attractive. He takes her to his windowless stone basement where he keeps her captive and views her as little more than an attractive specimen, you know, not as a real human, just like this attractive specimen, like I said, I guess. After several weeks, the poor lady dies of a illness that she had contracted, despite the efforts of the main antagonist of the film trying to keep her alive and save her for his own satisfaction. This movie had a very profound, lasting impression on little Robert, to say the least, because, well, we'll get into that in a minute. Now, at 39, Robert's dad passes away from a heart attack. Despite how abusive he was to Robert, this negatively affected him. He still loved his father. But little old Mary, she decided it was time to move on. So she remarried very shortly after that. Now, this was seen by Robert as an act of betrayal against his father. He was like, bitch, don't you think it's too soon? And Miss Mary was like, Mama gotta have a life too, Jody, okay? She was like, girl or boy, she wasn't trying to wait around. Now, as a result of this, Robert became very much withdrawn, like even more so, because, you know, first he had come out of his little shell, but now after this happened, it kind of shut him down. He became more withdrawn like he used to be in his earlier childhood years. He began writing foreign pen pals, collecting little coins and stuff they would send him from overseas. He also started painting. He was an artist. Shortly after high school, Robert relocates to Kansas City, and his interest in the arts led him to attend the Kansas City Art Institute with the aspirations of becoming an art professor. Now, the first year he got there, things were going well. He was considered a great and attentive student. He was making good grades, going to class on time, you know, doing what he should have been doing. But for some reason, his second year, he became very anti-authority. He was a rebel, seemingly without a cause. He just, you know, I don't know, he just got weird. He became acquainted with a group of students who supplied him with drugs to sell to other students for a profit. So he quickly became known as a little drug dealer around campus. Just a little small-time drug dealer, though. He wasn't breaking down keys or whatever. He was doing a little something for book money. He himself began experimenting with alcohol, and it got kind of bad. Like, homeboy was drinking all the time. Like, how you gonna be a drunk drug dealer? He also began engaging in acts of animal torture. What is torture? He also began engaging in acts of animal torture, which, you know, that's a sign right there. Y'all know that's a sign. So if you see your child strangling a dog, girl, you already know what's to come. You better go ahead, try to get them some milk. At the age of 19, he was arrested for selling methamphetamines to a cop. It was a little sting operation. He got busted, okay? He got busted. He went to jail. He was given a fine of $3,000. Just 1 month after this arrest, Robert and 2 other students are arrested for selling LSD and marijuana. On this occasion, he could not post bond. He didn't have the money. So he spent 5 days in jail. And luckily for him, the charges against him and one of the students were dropped because they didn't have enough evidence. So he made it out easy with that one. Now, in 1969, he withdraws from the Kansas City Art Institute after receiving very harsh criticism from the administrators because, y'all, he killed and cooked a duck for the sake of art. It's like, sir, that's just, you're just trying to get away with killing these animals some more. We see you And we know. Now, at this point in his life, he decided, I'm just about to be me. I'm not going to hide that I'm gay no more. I'm about to live my life how I want to. He decided to remain in Kansas City. He was like, I ain't going nowhere. I'm staying here, okay? This is my new home. He started to spend a lot of his time with male prostitutes, male drug addicts, petty criminals, and runaways. Now, he says that he wasn't sleeping with these folks. He was out here trying to do the Lord's work and turn their life around. Bro, your own life needed turning around. Girl, your shit in shambles. How you gonna fix somebody else's? What's the tea? I don't understand. Now, to his neighbors, he would say that he felt like a foster parent to these individuals. You only 21 and your life is a mess. But I don't see how he was fostering these folks. Girl. Anyway, that's just what he told the neighbors. He felt like a foster parent of sorts to these individuals who, you know, could use some guidance. Fast forward to the early 80s, a lot of his friends that he had before, they ceased contact with him because they just felt like something wasn't quite right. Robert was increasingly relying on the relationships with these young addicts and young male prostitutes for companionship. He was also very vocal to people about his frustration with these individuals being ignorant and not receptive to his efforts to assist them to steer their lifestyles away from deterioration and self-destruction. He was like, these girls don't want my help, which is probably because his life wasn't well together. Like, who out here taking advice from people who ain't following their own advice? If it's you, my girl, don't, okay? That means whenever I give you advice about how to have a man, girl, just don't even listen to me because I ain't even got one. Now, the true tea is Robert was having sexual relations with these people, and he would offer them a place to stay. He would offer them drugs, liquor in exchange for their sexual favors, but he also wanted control over them. Like, he wanted to sleep with them. He wanted them to do whatever he wanted them to do, whatever he said. He would loan them money. He would offer them a place to sleep rent free. And when they decided they wanted to do their own thing, he would become upset. He was like, no. He had a sense of ownership over these people. Now, to his neighbors, he was seen as just this flamboyant yet very helpful, very civic-minded individual. That's definitely not a standalone shade. So let's just go into kinky. Is that kinky is the name? Okay. All right. Yeah. So like I was saying, he was a pretty good neighbor. He was the chairman of the neighborhood watch. He encouraged his neighbors to, you know, keep an eye out for anything funky because he wanted to keep crime out of the neighborhood. He also sold artifacts and antiques that he would get from his pen pals across the world. He had pen pals in South Asia. He had pen pals in Africa. He had pen pals everywhere. And they would send him things and then he would sell them and make little monies. Both Robert's side business and his career began to flourish tremendously. Robert began working as a senior cook at several renowned restaurants in the Kansas City area, and he also joined the Chefs Association, training and helping develop young chefs that were, you know, up and coming and aspiring to be as great as he was. By 1981, his side business was making him enough money to let go of his job as a chef. And so he decided, as I think any of us would, to, you know, focus more on his own personal business, which at first he was running out of the house. In 1982, he began renting a booth at the local flea market. This little booth / store was called Bob's Bazaar. I'll insert a picture of his little business card, girl, right here. He primarily sold and traded primitive art, antiques, and jewelry here, and he made pretty good money doing so. But after a while, business kind of died down, and so he decided to rent out space in his home. He had a three-story home, so he decided, you know what, all this space shall not go to waste. Look at me, bars, okay, bars. He started to rent out rooms in his home to make extra money, and it was going well for him. At the flea market, a guy by the name of Paul Howell, he rents a booth adjacent to Robert's, and the two become acquainted. They become friendly. He also meets Paul's son, Jerry Howell, and they have kind of a strange relationship because they would often get into it, and then they would be friends, and they would be into it, and it's like, do y'all like each other or not? It was alleged that Jerry would oftentimes make fun of Robert for being so flamboyant, and he would tease him about, you know, make homophobic jokes. Apparently this rubbed Robert the wrong way because, according to him, Jerry had confided in him and told him that he and his friends worked as male prostitutes when they needed extra money. So he was just like, you trying to come at me about being homosexual, but you out here gay for pay. So what's tea? In the early 1980s, not soon after Paul started to rent the booth, he had gotten enough money to open up a storefront, and he moved his family in the apartment above the storefront, and they were living good or whatever. But his son continued to get in these weird altercations, weird back and forths with Robert. They would be upset with each other, get into a heated argument, and then next thing you know, they were cool again. So it's kind of like, it was just weird. On July 5th, 1984, Robert, he offers to drive now 19-year-old Jerry to a dance competition that was in a town nearby. On the way, Robert supplied the teen with alcohol, and this alcohol was laced with Valium and a sedative. I can't pronounce the sedative because I can't read that good, I guess. Now, the thing about this stuff, in the 1950s, it was used on humans as an antipsychotic. Nowadays, it's used exclusively on animals as a sedative. So he puts a bunch of this stuff and a bunch of Valium in alcohol. He supplies it to 19-year-old Jerry, and then, of course, 19-year-old Jerry passes out, and so he makes a detour to his own home. When they get back to Robert's place, Robert ties the young man to his bed, and he spends the next 28 hours repeatedly raping and drugging the young man. He tortured him repeatedly, and Jerry was like, you know what, like, I know we don't get along, but why all this? Like, he constantly asked him why he was doing what he was doing to him. He refused to answer. He continues to torture the young man until he eventually suffocates from a combination of the gag, the drugs, and his own vomit. Now, Robert claims at this point that he attempted to perform CPR on the young man. He said it wasn't his intention to kill him, and he tried to save him, but his efforts were unsuccessful. After he realized that he could not save Jerry, he took his body down to the basement, strung it up upside down, made incisions into all of his main arteries, and put a cooking pot underneath him to catch the blood. He left him there overnight to drain his body of all blood. The next day, he returned to the basement and chopped his body up into small pieces. From there, he put the pieces in trash bags and set it out on the curb for the trash men to come along and take him the next day. And they did not realize that they were picking up the remains of a body. Throughout this process, Robert took notes detailing in very, very graphic detail the entire ordeal, like from the torture, what he was thinking. He took photos of Jerry's body at different stages before he died and afterward. Now, Paul, Jerry's father, he alerts the authorities after his son disappears. Like, after he doesn't answer his calls and he doesn't hear from his son, he's like, that's unusual. And he wants to know, of course, where his child is. Paul was aware that Robert had offered him a ride to the dance competition, and so, of course, he let authorities know that. But when questioned by the police, Robert told them that, yes, he had dropped Jerry off that day, and he had not seen him or heard from him since. On April 10th, 1985, 23-year-old Robert Sheldon, who was a former tenant of Robert's, murderous Robert's, he arrived on Robert's doorstep, once again needing a place to stay. He asked if he could stay there and pay rent just for a short period of time, and Robert agrees. Now, he allows Mr. Sheldon to move back into the house again, with the intention of making him his next victim. He had essentially gotten away with his murder of Jerry, and he was ready to do it again. On April 12th, just 2 days after Mr. Sheldon had returned to the home, Robert returned home from work. He found Mr. Sheldon intoxicated in his home. He had had him a little drink, and he was feeling fine, how I'm feeling right now. Robert proceeds to drug Mr. Sheldon with the tranquilizers and takes him to his basement, and he bound his wrist with wire. Now, Robert said that he had no ill feelings toward Mr. Sheldon himself, but he was harboring some ill feelings towards some other people that had pissed him off, and so he just wanted to use Mr. Sheldon as an outlet for those emotions. It's like, Why you scared to take it out on who you mad at? For 3 days, he holds this young man captive on the second floor of his home in a bedroom, drugging him with sedatives and subjecting him to multiple forms of torture. This man swabbed drain cleaner into his eyes, stuck needles underneath his fingernail beds, and tightened the wire around his wrists in an effort to cause nerve damage in his hands. He filled the man's ears with caulk to diminish his hearing, and he was not sexually attracted to Mr. Sheldon, so he didn't perform any type of sexual assault on him, but he did torture him. Now, on April 15th, this is 5 days after Mr. Sheldon arrived there and 3 days into his captivity, a repairman arrives to fix the roof of the house, and in an effort to hide Mr. Sheldon or keep him from, being found out, he takes a bag, puts it over Mr. Sheldon's head, and takes some rope and strangles him. Once the repairman is done in the house, he takes the body of Mr. Sheldon up to the 3rd floor bathroom where he dismembers the body like a maniac. 2 months later, Robert finds Mark Wallace hiding in his tool shed during a thunderstorm. Now, Mark was not a complete stranger to Robert. He had previously done some yard work for him, so he recognized him from that. He was acquainted with him enough to know that he suffered from severe anxiety and depression, and he will often get wound up due to his anxiety. So he offers the young man to come into the house. I don't know if this lip color is gonna work, but just ride it out with me, okay? Let's just ride it out and see.
Nope.
Definitely not a fan. I want a nude. I think this tranquilizer is pronounced chlorpromazine, and so that's what I'm gonna say from now on. Now, once inside the house, Robert offers to inject him with this chlorpromazine, and then he tells him that this is going to calm him down. It's going to relax him. Mark willingly accepts the offer, and just 30 minutes later, he is sedated and tied up. And here I am thinking, I make bad decisions. Robert carries an unconscious Mark up to the 2nd floor bedroom where he tortures him for an entire day. He waited for Mark to regain his consciousness before he began the torture. He connected alligator clips to the young man's nipples in an effort to send, what is with that? Because I feel like in one story, a couple of videos back, somebody else did the same thing. It was the shoe fetish slayer plugging folks up to electronics and stuff. Well, Robert attempted to do the same thing via the alligator clips in the young man's nipples, and he also inserted hypodermic needles into the victim's back. And unfortunately, Mark dies after just a couple of days of Robert's relentless torture. Now, according to Robert's own notes in his little notebook, the drugs, the gag, and the lack of oxygen were the cause of his death, which he wrote down to be at precisely 7 p.m. on June 23rd. Now, with this crime, as with the other one, he had kept extensive detailed notes on the entire ordeal. Strange man. Now, on September 26, 1985, Robert receives a phone call from an old acquaintance, Mr. James Ferris. James needed a place to stay, so he asked Robert if he could just come by, crash a little bit, pay him rent for a short time, and Robert agrees to let him come. All the while, Robert had pure intentions of making James his next victim. They make arrangements to meet at a bar. They have some drinks. Robert offers to make James a meal, so they go back to Robert's house where Robert prepares a meal, of course laced with the tranquilizers. Once James passes out, he ties him to a bed, and just like the others, he proceeds to torture him for almost a constant 27 hours. Yo, I finished my makeup way too early, so we just gonna be sipping wine and talking for the rest of this video. That's gonna be the vibe. The torture that James endured included him plugging his testicles up to this machine that he used to send the electric volts through his previous victims. He attempted a sick and twisted version of acupuncture by placing those needles into his back, neck, and testicles. Who acupuncture testicles, sir? Why would you do such a thing? You have testicles yourself, so you should know that does not feel well.
Did you guys hear that? I'm scared.
Oh, hold on, that's Blue. He's locked himself up. That scared my ass. I was scared, y'all, ain't gonna lie. After so many hours of torture, James becomes very delirious, but Robert continues with his sexual assault and his abuse until James, by Robert's own notes, was unable to sit up for longer than 10 to 15 seconds on his own, and his breathing became very delayed. This was after 2 whole days of torture. And at this point, unfortunately, James, he succumbs to his injuries and he passes away. Now, the following year, Robert runs into Todd Stoops. Todd Stoops was a drug addict and former male prostitute, and at some point in the past, he and his wife had both lived with Robert and rented out a room. Now, they had lived with him twice before this, actually. And since that second time, they had not seen each other. On June 17th, 1986, the two ran into each other at a park. They caught up for a second. Robert invited Todd over to the house for lunch. He had always been very, very attracted to Todd. And Todd knew this, and he was already, you know, a little gay for pay. So when Robert propositioned him for $13 for sex, he happily accepted because he needed some drug money. And like I said, he had a little past to being gay for pay, so he didn't mind. He didn't see nothing wrong with a little bump and grind. Did I just rhyme again? I think I did. Now, we all know Robert by now and what his intentions truly were. And because he had been so physically attracted to Todd, he made a vow to himself to keep him alive longer than the others, because the others up to this point were only living around 2 days. He did not want the same for Todd. He wanted to keep him alive and keep him longer. Now, he drugs Todd and ties him up, and initially he doesn't start with torture. He tries to get Todd to kind of agree to be a submissive sex slave, but Todd wasn't having that. Todd was like, girl, no. Todd was like, hell no. I'm not, let me go, untie me. And we know Robert wasn't going to do that. When Robert saw how uncooperative Todd was, he decided to hook the alligator clips to Todd's eyes and shock him in an effort to blind him. And then he injected drain cleaner into his larynx in an effort to silence his screams, because Todd was trying to get attention from a neighbor, anybody screaming for help, and Robert was trying to avoid that. He also repeatedly sexually assaulted Todd. Now, I just want to give you this warning because this is about to get a little graphic and disturbing. On June 27th, 2 weeks into his captivity, Robert ruptures Todd's anal cavity while fisting him. This caused a lot of bleeding, and after this, Todd's condition rapidly declines. He becomes very weak, unresponsive, and this isn't what Robert wants, right? He wanted to keep Todd. He wanted to keep him alive. In an effort to reverse his condition, he starts to feed him soup and really try to nurture him and nurse him back to health, but nothing he did was helping, because soup don't fix a ruptured anus, sir. Why would you think that it did? Anyway, he's still writing in his notebook everything that's happening. He said that at this point, Todd wasn't keeping anything down. He was very weak. He was unable to breathe in a sitting position, so he had to lay Todd down all the time. And on July 1st, 1986, Todd finally passes. Now, a forensic specialist later determined that the ruptured anal cavity caused him to go into septic shock, and that's what ultimately killed the guy. In the spring of 1987, Robert meets and befriends a 20-year-old by the name of Larry Pearson, who stops by his shop. He found the things that little Robert was selling very interesting. The two had a conversation about a lot of the things that they had in common and their shared interest in the artifact. During this conversation, Robert finds that the young man is looking for a place to stay. He offers him a room. He tells him that he does not have to pay rent, that he could just do chores around the house, clean it up, keep it in order, and that would be sufficient enough to cover his rent. Now, according to Robert, he did not have intentions of victimizing Larry, which Robert can't be trusted, so we don't know that to be true, and personally, I don't believe it. But he said his intent was not to victimize Larry, that a couple of weeks after Larry had gotten there and got comfortable and had a couple of drinks one day, he began joking about taking advantage of and robbing gay males over in Wichita. And this rubbed Robert the wrong way, because Robert was like, I guess, he's a older gay man at this point, and he just didn't take too kind to this young man boasting and bragging about tricking the gay community, okay? I think that was a lie. I think that the conversation may have happened, but he had intention of victimizing this young man all along. That's just my opinion, but I ain't here to tell you that's what happened because we don't know that to be true. That's just what I think. That night, he got Larry very drunk. Then he injected him with the tranquilizers and moved him down to the basement where he tied him up. He didn't tie him to the bed, though. He tied him to, like, the ceiling with his hands above his head, and then he injected his larynx with drain cleaner. I don't know if this was working, though. I guess it was working because he tried it with somebody else in an effort to silence him. He then goes upstairs, and he gets his little electronic device, plugs Larry up to it, and then he begins the torture that he does on everybody. Now, after 5 days in captivity, Larry is kind of gaining Robert's trust because he is a lot more cooperative than the other 6 victims. Robert actually made a note of that he was the most cooperative, that he had started to gain his trust, even though he had him tied up by his hands and broke a couple bones in his hand, beating them with a pipe. As a reward for his cooperation, Larry removes him from the basement and takes him to the 2nd floor. There he performs a lot less torture on Larry, but a lot more sexual abuse. He makes the agreement with Larry that as long as he's kind of cooperative sexually, he won't have to endure any physical abuse, to which Larry agrees to make things kind of easier on himself. After 6 weeks of being in captivity, Larry snaps during a forced session of fellatio. He bites into Robert's pee-pee, okay? Kudos to you, Larry. You're a real one. And begins screaming that he can no longer take this anymore. He can't endure anymore. He's sick of this. Robert grabs something and begins bludgeoning him, subsequently killing him. And then he himself goes to the hospital for treatment for his bitten penis. Now, I don't know how he explained this to the doctors or what he told them had happened, but they treated him and sent him home. And when he got back home, that's when he dismembered Larry's body. He cut off Larry's head, put it in a bag, and put it inside the freezer for a few days before burying it in his backyard. On March 29th, 1988, the year that God blessed the world with a very special girl, Robert abducts 22-year-old male prostitute Christopher Bryson. He lures him back to his house, of course, with the promise of sex for money. Once they get back to the house, he hits the young man over the head with the iron bar and ties him to the bed, where he is subjected to previous methods of torture and abuse, the same as his previous victims. Although in Christopher's case, for whatever reason, Robert's sick, twisted ass kept swabbing his eyeballs with ammonia. Now, this is the thing. I was just recently introduced to ammonia last weekend when I was doing my home cleaning. I had heard of ammonia. I heard it was strong, but I didn't really know that well how strong it was. So I can't imagine this because I just put some of mine in my mop water and then I used some multi-purpose cleaner too. And when I say the fumes almost took me and blew out, girl, don't do it. Please don't do it. Okay, no. I had to get Poppy and Blue and leave the house for a while and for it to air out. It was just so bad. So I can't imagine straight ammonia being put into my eyeballs. Terrible. And he did this because he told Larry the only thing he needed to be thinking about was him, them, and this house. How you even know I'm thinking about something else? Like, how do you even know he was thinking about anything else? What else would he be thinking about? Like, what else would he be thinking about? Football? Like, I don't get it. After a few days of captivity and torture and sexual assault, Robert explains to Christopher that he has now begun to trust him. What? And that although he was willing to negotiate the physical and torture and abuse, he was not willing to negotiate the sexual abuse. He told him that he was willing to be more lenient with him and administer less physical abuse if he would be more cooperative on the sexual front. And he tells Christopher, quote, "I have gotten this far with other people before and they're dead now because of mistakes they made." No, they're dead now because you're an asshole. That's why they're dead. Now, Christopher is smart. He decides at this point, like, I might be able to use this growing trust to my advantage. Over the next couple of days, he is able to persuade Robert to tie his hands in front of him versus above his head or to the bed. He said that it was restricting his blood flow, and of course he needed you know, his hands to be a nice, proper little sex slave. He also persuaded Robert to leave a television on inside the room, so while Robert was away at his shop at work, you know, he would have something to entertain himself. He even left him the remote. Day 4, Robert leaves for work. He thinks everything is fine, but unbeknownst to him, he has left a little pack of matches in the room with Christopher. Christopher realizes that these matches are within his reach, and he's able to get them, strike up a match, and burn the rope that Robert was using to restrain his wrists. He then manages to escape the house by jumping out of the second floor window. He wasn't wearing anything but a dog collar. On the fall, he breaks bones in his feet and still manages to run down the street. He ran towards a meter reader that he spotted, screaming for help. The guy takes him into the house that he was metering, and then they phone the police. The police come out within minutes. Now, Christopher initially claimed that he was a hitchhiker, girl. He didn't want to tell them he was a little old prostitute. He told them he was a hitchhiker. He was picked up by this crazy man, and that this man had been holding him hostage and used him as a sex slave before he, you know, escaped and jumped out of the window. He told him about the drugs, the alcohol, the drain cleaner, the electronic device he used to shock him, and in addition to the dog collar and broken foot, like the police noticed that he had all these scars on him. His eyes were swollen and red, and he had these huge welts and scars all across his body. Christopher is taken to the hospital for treatment. The police, they contact the police department and ask for a warrant to, you know, be drawn up because they want to go in and see what's going on in here. Christopher also told police about the photos that Robert had taken of him and all the photos that he had shown him of the previous victims, both before and after their death. How Robert described them as his unsuccessful collection of sex slaves. Y'all, these images can be found on Google search. I'm not going to insert them because it's not that they're very graphic, which it depends on what your definition of graphic is. Like, it's not like open wounds, blood, and gore. It's none of that, but it's pretty bad. So I'm not gonna put him in my video. I just don't ever feel comfortable inserting like the victim's crime scene photos. But if you Google his name and hit images, they're there. On the evening of Christopher's escape, Robert is arrested. He refused to allow police inside, and this was before the warrant was granted, so they had to ask, and he was like, no. But it didn't take long to obtain the search warrant, and once they did and entered his property, like everything that was there corroborated Christopher's story. The second floor bedroom had the burnt ropes there that he told them that he had lit on fire to free himself. The electrical transformer was there, still plugged into the wall. A metal tray containing syringes and multiple prescription drugs was there right up beside the bed. Swabs and eye drops were also close to the bed. The ammonia was there, like, ugh. During a more extensive search of the house and the property, police also found a skull in the second floor bedroom closet. They also found another head in the backyard buried that had been decomposed. There were several human vertebrae stored in hallway closets that had like knife marks and chainsaw marks on them. 2 different saws were discovered in the basement of the property. A chainsaw was actually also discovered in the basement that still had human flesh, blood, and pubic hairs in between like the teeth of the chainsaw. Like, luminol tests revealed that the entire basement pretty much was blood stained and had been cleaned, but you know them luminol tests, they tell the tea. And so once they flicked off the lights and turned on the blue ones, it was like blood everywhere. A total of 368 Polaroids were found of various males who were in various locations of Robert's house. These pictures show Christopher as well as a number of other men in various stages of their torture, both before and after death. They found a bunch of sexual devices, sex toys, pornography, needles, and a book of narcotics to tell like the effects on the body. It's like, sir, what? In Robert's bedroom, on top of a chest, they found a notebook that detailed in detail each one of his victims, everything he had done to them, like from start to finish, all of his thoughts. It was just shit. It was everything that they needed to find him guilty. He had also been keeping the newspaper clippings surrounding Jerry's disappearance. He also had the wallet and driver's license of James Ferris, who had also been reported missing. So after collecting all of this evidence, Robert, of course, is charged with the murders of 6 men. He accepted a plea deal where he would plead guilty and reveal everything about each of the crimes, which I feel like they had enough through his little notebooks. Like, why did y'all need a full confession? Why did y'all give him something in exchange for a full confession? I don't understand that. But anyway, in exchange for his full confession, they gave him life without parole. He was trying to avoid the death penalty, which of course he ended up doing. And he remained adamant to investigators that these acts were not for his own enjoyment, but for what he termed as his physical and mental satisfaction. Is that not the same thing?
Electric chair.
Is it not? Is that not the same thing? He died of a heart attack while incarcerated at the Missouri State Prison on October 8th, 1992. He was 43 years old. And that wraps up this story. That is the story of horrible Robert Berdella. He was a terrible person. You know, he kind of puts me in the mind of Dennis Nielsen. It's like, how are y'all able to do all this stuff for so long and get away with it? I never get that. I just don't. Anyway, I have, ooh, this might look cute with the little, let me see if this look cute with a little gloss. I don't know if I like that. I mean, I don't hate it, but you know, whatever. I got a movie date with my mama. We about to go see Bad Boys 2. It's only been out for like a month now. But anyway, better late than never. If you enjoyed this video, please don't leave without giving it a thumbs up. Share it with your friend. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts. As always, I appreciate you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.